We love audience feedback. So, Doug is going to come down and introduce Brewmaster, which is about the craft beer industry. He is the president of Fourth Row Films. He's brought another colleague, two colleagues, Danielle Rosen and Susan Bedusa, and they are doing a Q&A after the film, so please stick around. And we have a cast member also coming with us, right, for the Q&A. They're hiding. And we have welcomed Doug before. We've done just recently the film Bisbee. We did Hey Bartender. We did Drink, Stoned, Brilliant, and Dead. Actually, sorry, Brilliant, Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead. Hey Bartender, all in the poker movie. And as I mentioned, most recently Bisbee. Doug is an award-winning director, producer, and writer who has featured his films at Sundance, Tribeca, Berlin, South by Southwest, and many other festivals. So please give a warm Avon welcome. Welcome back to Doug Tirola.
Thanks for that nice introduction. So I'm going to just make a few announcements beforehand. First of all, we love this. The Avon for us is our, we don't have a theater in Westport, Connecticut, which is where Susan and I are from, and Danielle being from Weston. So this is really our home theater. We love this theater. I mean, if you haven't been here before, hopefully you understand why. It's what a theater should be. It's a palace in a sense, and it's great for filmmakers. So thanks for having us here. When you said I'm the president of Fourth Row Films, so I want to, before we get started, introduce you to the people who really run Fourth Row Films, which are the two producers of this film. Both people that I worked with a long time, my closest friends, great collaborators, and the best producers, I think, working in the business. If you saw what we make with the resources we have. So first is Susan Bedusa. Where are you, Sue? I know you're hiding. There. And Danielle Rosen. Danielle, where are you? So, who's a documentary fan? Who likes beer? Don't raise your hand, that's my daughter. I guess the movie is obviously about the craft beer industry and why, you know, maybe a few decades ago there were just a couple hundred breweries, and now depending who you talk to, there's 6 or 7 or 8,000. But for us, the people who made it, I think the movie is really using beer as a metaphor for us as independent filmmakers. And for those of you that love movies, I just ask you to watch it with that a little bit in mind. In my mind, the beers are like the movies, and the brewmasters are the directors. You'll see in the film there are these beer festivals, and that's just like our Sundance and Tribeca. And then most importantly, there are these communities of people that love movies, and what we found out making this is there's the huge community of people that just think about beer all day. And they're not alcoholics. Well, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people think. Someone goes into beer because they just love drinking, but it's so much more than that. And I think what drew us to this story, it was really the people who make beer, the people who dream of working around beer, the people who something happened earlier in their life where there's some connection that's made where they feel that beer represents something for them. And for us, I think that's movies. And so hopefully you understand that that's our sort of personal way into this. And then the last thing I like to do is because it is a beer movie, so it should be a little bit fun. I mean, there are some serious parts, but it's beer. So I'm going to ask you for one beer, one of these great beers. If you didn't get one before, if you did, you get the whole can now. And first of all, for the Half Full Brewery in Stamford, please do not leave the state. Thank you for being a business in Connecticut. The breweries here are awesome. And so our favorite scene about beer, I'm gonna describe it in a scripted movie, and then raise your hand. Don't shout it out if you know what it is. So I'll just describe it. It's a father and a son drinking a beer. Anybody? You're not supposed to shout it out. But you did, so you can get this beer. Who is that? Does anybody know the scene? Tell us the scene. So the car crashes, and the father and son share this moment, and it ends with, Chevy Chase is drinking the beer slowly, and Anthony Michael Hall just chugging it down, and then all of a sudden, he just goes, "Good talk, son." And that's how we end all of our meetings at Fourth Row Films. Good talk, son. So thank you for being here tonight. And who's that, Jamie? I'm going to bring this to you. She went to the University of Wisconsin.
Thanks for staying through the movie. We're gonna before we get started. I wanted to say I love the picture at the end of Brian and his wife, and I just wanted to say, working on these films, we're on the road a lot, and there's a lot of late nights. And as I like to say, if you've ever seen Close Encounters, there are these moments when you're at home, but you're not at home, like when he builds that mashed potato thing, and if anyone knows that Close Encounters movie. So any spouse that lets their husband make, in consecutive order, a movie called Hey Bartender, Drunk, Stone, Brilliant, Dead, and Brewmaster deserves an applause. So for my wife, Kristen. And the other thing, I was just thinking, we've worked together, the three of us, so long, and I was thinking in 2009 wasn't our first movie, but our first movie that premiered at a big festival outside of New York, and all of our parents were there. And other than Sue's dad, but Sue's mom's here tonight, and Danielle's parents and my parents. And I think one of the reasons we've been able to there's so many ups and downs in making films, just like you see for the people in the beer industry, I think is because we come from great families. So I just wanted to acknowledge our parents while we're here. So I'll ask the first question. Can each of you tell us about your first beer?
Oh, you go first. I don't.
Sue, the microphone.
Sorry.
Don't try and get out of it.
I think my first beer is this on?
She turned it off on purpose.
Yeah, right. I think my first beer, was at my best friend's house with her older sister and the boyfriend and the best friend and all the high school kids. And it was a first beer and also a first sip of Kahlua and whiskey and vodka and everything. And I sang into the tail of the dog, like as a microphone. That's what I remember.
My story is not as interesting, but since my parents are here, they'll enjoy it. My first beer, I'll tell you, was a Corona, and it was stolen by a family friend from the parent cooler of beers, so the kids could have some beers while the parents were having their party. It was the Liguoris.
Okay. So Danielle, why don't you?
Oh yes.
I'm gonna have it tonight. Cooper, earmuffs. So my first beer was a Shangling, which is a beer from Ohio. I collected beer cans for a while, even though I don't think I've never seen my mom drink a beer, and my dad's not a big beer drunker. But there was someone staying over with me. I had gone to one of those away high schools for a little bit, and there was a guy staying with us. I don't know why we were there, and we drank these two beers, and I was so nervous about what to do with them because you wouldn't bring them back to school to hide them. And we crushed the beer can and put it in the bathroom toilet. I didn't know a lot about plumbing, obviously, and then I think when I came back, my mom had said, "We found something in the toilet." So that's that. All right, Mom, you remember that? Okay. Yeah. Great. So Danielle, tell us how it's, in movies, it's all about finding, as we say, when you cast your movie, you cast your fate. How did we find Drew?
Yeah, so when we first started making this film, we spent a little bit of time trying to figure out where the story was going to go and looking for characters for the film. And I happened to mention to my brother about the movie, and he was like, Drew, who he went to college with, who I'd met many a times and was a lawyer. He's like, Drew's been really getting into beer lately. You might want to talk to him. And so I was like, really? Okay. And I talked to him, and from talking to him, I kind of got a sense that it was more than just he's really into beer right now. It kind of seemed like he was in a moment where he might be interested in taking things to the next step. And so we decided to do an interview with him. The first interview was kind of just more of an exploratory situation of just getting a sense of him. And, we thought maybe it could be like a interview with a beer enthusiast, not necessarily the main character of the documentary. But, after that first interview, I remember we talked and you were like, Drew's great. Like, I think he's someone that we could follow and really kind of focus in on this homebrewing element of this community. And we just kind of happened to hit him in the right moment, that he was really at that moment of like, if I'm going to do this, now's the time that I'm going to do this. And I just got to, push myself to make this jump into a different career. So we just kind of really happened in on the right circumstance, thanks to my brother.
Yep. Sue, tell us why these films take so long. In other words, how long did this film take? And how has it evolved, even from our first festival appearance to the last changes we made before we opened in New York?
I think the film has taken about 3 years from beginning to end, and part of that is just following stories, so really being able to get a beginning, middle, and end to Drew's story and Brian's story. And that, this film premiered at South by Southwest last year, and I would say even that cut to this cut has made, it's been a huge change, and the story's gotten tighter, and it's good. So, yeah, these things take so long just because you have to really follow your people and get into the stories of what's going on in their lives.
If I remember the timing correctly, I think it was less than 2 weeks before our South by Southwest premiere that Brian told us, I passed the Master Cicerone exam. And so we were like trying to finish the film for the premiere, and we're like, oh no, we have to change the whole ending. Yeah. And which made it so much better.
It made it so much better, and I think we changed the ending again maybe 2 weeks ago.
So let me before I open up to questions, I don't think either of you, when you were in college, majored in documentary. Sue wanted to be a writer, if I remember, and Danielle wanted to work in theater. So what do you like that you stuck with documentaries a while? And obviously we've made 12 in about 10 years. So what do you like most about it?
Sure. I love every single experience we have is different, even though the muscles are the same. But being immersed in these worlds that we would have never been a part of, whether it's the beer world or the poker world or, a small town in Arizona, you get all of these really cool experiences that your life never would have interacted with otherwise. And I like you guys.
Sue said what I was going to say, but it really just adding in on what Sue said, working in documentary film, every single project is an opportunity to walk in someone else's shoes, to explore a different industry, community, career. It allows you to, it just takes you places that you wouldn't get to go if you only worked in one little world. And I've gotten to do 12 years working with the same people, where I've gotten to go to 10 different worlds, conservatively. And so just I feel like I'm a part of so many of these different little communities in a way where I get to not just be an observer, but get to really know and care about the people that become part of our films.
And then before the last, what do you appreciate, or is there anything you learned about the beer industry that you would take with you? They just seem different. You like beer more, like beer less?
I definitely am more familiar with more of the styles of beer than I was before. I thought I had a good idea of the different beer styles. When I went to college, I was telling this story the other day, but in college, you aren't necessarily drinking the best beer, and but we had this one beer store that was called EBI that they had a lot of craft beers, and we would always go and pick up, a couple of, the 30 racks that were cheap, and then we would be like, okay, and let's get like 2 6-packs of good stuff, and like we'd all like try it and sample the stuff that was good, and I thought through that I had a good sense of what was out there with craft beer, but through making the film, I just got introduced to so many different levels of like styles I wasn't even aware of, and I really love the passion that everyone has. Like when someone's explaining to you what like a goza is, and the fact that they're like so intense of like why it's so different and cool and great. They're just so passionate about that, and you just feed on that passion.
Yeah, I would elaborate on that. My sister and her boyfriend just opened a beer bar in South Norwalk called Spigot, if anyone wants to go. And so they talk about beer with such passion, and I don't think I fully understood what was behind that until making this film. It's more than just wanting to drink beer all day, which is good.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Hey Doug, Dan Page. Before the broadcast you mentioned...
Hello?
That's okay. Before the broadcast you mentioned the craft beer industry, the brewers are similar to what you do as a filmmaker. And the craft brewer industry is becoming overpopulated, and there's so many new breweries, Massachusetts, Connecticut in particular. Given today's political landscape and how like individualism and independence is being challenged dramatically, how do you feel that this is a good microcosm for filmmakers, and how do you see filmmaking changing along with the kind of the Brewmaster process?
Yeah, I think one of the, well, let's start with this. Jim Cook, he seems to be somewhat controversial in many ways. If you could see, he was really loving his product during that interview. I think he brought a lot of people into this industry, and other people like him, even if they haven't become billionaires doing it too. And I think the film industry is like that, is in the same way, which is, can you have too many films? Probably, but people probably thought that for a while, but now with Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime, there seems to be more places for people to watch them. And the same with beer. When we interviewed, there's a woman in the movie, Allison from Maine, and she's the Thirsty Pig owner. And she told us this thing, because she's like the godmother of beer in Portland, Maine. She changes her taps every other week, and people want to get on those taps because it's sort of like a curation, like having a great name on the back of your book if you're an unknown author. And she said, all these guys say, oh, I just want to serve my community and have my few customers. He goes, but if they go to the bathroom and we look in their backpack, there's probably a business plan and a bunch of like the address to Miller and Budweiser and some hedge fund people. So I don't think everybody is like that. But I think there's some people that get into it because they just love it, and even if it's going to be a modest success, they're excited about it. And I think the people who are going into it, as I always pick on Powerade, it's like, I love the story of Gatorade. The sports manager is like, hey, it's really hot here, we'll make this, and then it somehow becomes this billion-dollar thing. And then someone in some office is like, if we can get 10% of that business, it'll be great. That's nothing against that, but it's a different reason to get into it. And I think with filmmaking, and I think, at least I learned with making beer, it's so hard that if someone's in it just for the money, they're gonna go, there's an easier way to make money. There's an easier way to make money. So it has to be for these other experiences. That's why at the end of the movie, before we get to the sort of the Marvel part, at the second ending, all those quotes those people say at the end about just loving the work and sharing the work and working with people, I think that's what it's about for us. And I think the best brewers are the same way. But as the guy from Two Roads said, you have all those vineyards. Can you have all these breweries, and there's certainly restaurants that open all the time, and some make it and some don't. And 2001.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Diane. I'm just so intrigued by Brian and the process. It must have been so nerve-wracking for him to be tested, but also to have a camera. And I'm curious how they allowed the camera in on the process and sort of the impact and his agreeing to take the risk and do that.
You want to talk about the Cicerone? Well, I'll say, so we met, this is how we met Brian. And as a matter of fact, I want to point, there's a gentleman here, Jerry Keene, who used to work with Pilsner Kell, and he's the reason we were able to get access to be in the Czech Republic on the brewery for Pilsner Kell, which is like a kind of like a college campus. It's amazing. It just so happened that Jason, his mentor, his friend, and him were there because they have this great job where they just get to go around Europe and go to different breweries and drink as research, like a European road trip. And so we were in the very beginning of the process, and we're like, well, we just like to interview people. We're like, these guys aren't going to be in the movie because they're too corporate. You know, they work for a big company. But they were both just great, the love they had for what they do. And Brian had this whole connection to his dad with beer in Western Pennsylvania. And so we didn't really even know what the Cicerone program was. And then when we learned about it, we're like, that could be really interesting. And it took a while to court him. He's kind of humble. You know, he's not, you know, he's great at talking about beer, but I think he was nervous about it. And then eventually we were able to convince him. And I think part of that was because he thought he was going to pass the second time. And then, of course, that didn't work out. And, you know, in the editing room or back in the office, we're like, oh, that's going to be good for the movie, even though we were like devastated that he didn't pass it. So I think it's just that. And then in terms of the Cicerone, that actually, Danielle was harder to get access to that world.
Yeah, so when we started talking with Cicerone, you know, we interviewed Ray, and who founded the Cicerone program, and then we, you know, as we started, he knew we were following Brian and him going through the process of preparing for the Master Cicerone exam. And, you know, it really did take a couple of months of talking and convincing and setting parameters in terms of what we were allowed to film or not allowed to film during the actual test. And so we had to just be very respectful of the space and not, you know, a little more fly on the wall of a situation so that we weren't interrupting anyone as they were, or like distracting, I guess more distracting anyone as they were taking this exam. You know, for most of the people in the room, something they've been studying for all year. I mean, you got to imagine, you know, following a kid taking the SATs and then be like, great, we're going to put a camera in your face while you like actually take this test and you really care about this. You know, and so we were very respectful, and like there were a lot of times where we're like, leave, and you know, we left, and you know, other times we were like, okay, you can come back, you can come film some of this. So we kind of did that dance for all of that. I do have to say, probably the hardest thing, like one of the hardest things that we've ever filmed, is listening to Ray tell Brian he didn't pass. You know, just as a bystander, you obviously when you're making something like this, you develop relationships and friendships with the people that you film, and not, you know, Brian didn't want us with him while he was finding out the news because I think he was nervous of if it was bad, but he was okay with us being on Ray's side, and Ray said that we could be there filming him. And Ray did not tell us what the answer was before he made the phone call, so we were finding out real time with Brian too, and you know, trying to be objective and not like be like, what, no, but like at the same time you're like, oh God. But you know, just because we knew how devastated Brian must have been, but he passed.
Okay, I'm Charlotte, and this is Cooper. Okay, yeah, so we have a question. We were wondering what your guys' favorite bar was. Like where to get, you know, all that good stuff.
Favorite bar?
Dunville's.
Yeah, Dunville's.
Dunville's. I would say the one thing I'd say, if you watch the end of the credits, though, there's a place in New York that because it's close to our office, called Kettle of Fish. And because we're fans of the National Lampoon Animal House, if you've ever seen Animal House, and also the Blues Brothers, at the very end, it says, when in Los Angeles, go visit Universal Studios and say hi to Babs, the character. And so as a sort of homage in all our films, we say, go to the Kettle of Fish. And then in this one, we put the Thirsty Pig because of the Portland, Maine. Any other questions?
I just wanted to say, we still have plenty of time for more questions, but this coming weekend, I'm over here, this coming weekend is the Connecticut, actually called the Elm City Brew Festival, right in downtown New Haven at the College Street Music Hall, right near the entrance to Yale. Over 65 Connecticut craft breweries will be there. And they'll have music, great food. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, you guys. Our sound system is going nuts tonight. I wonder if Josh has been having a little bit too much of that half-filled brewery, the tasting. Anyway, it will be available by going online to the Elm City Brew Festival, and they will have 225 different varieties of craft beers, which is pretty amazing. So that's this Saturday up in New Haven.
Last one?
I just have a question. It was about, it didn't really touch on it in the film, but the small brewers and breweries, do the big American breweries go after these guys to buy them, to get their percentage? And then if that happens, does the beer quality change? Does the,
It's a good question, the big beer versus small beer. So when we were starting, the only documentaries, I don't think they played like in theaters, but that we could find were really just about that subject, the big beer versus the small beer. And we just decided that was not, we're all underdog people, so I think there wasn't a story there for us. I think, like I said before, there's some people that are praying that those big places come and buy them, and there are other places that want to maintain their independence. I think what we tried to do is put a thought we hadn't heard out there, which is have some of those people say, it's really hard to be consistent, because I think we just like that theme in life beyond beer. So in other words, that the person that can make that beer the same every time, everybody has a respect for that, even if it's at these big breweries. And there's a time in the night when Domino's is still good. I don't want to eat it every year even, but there's a time for Domino's. There's a time for, my kids love it. Sausage and egg McMuffins still taste good at a certain moment. So there's a place for that. So it's such an easy target. But I will say this: I remember being shocked. We saw there was a brewery in Seattle. They got bought out, and there were people like making videos, pouring their beer, opening and saying, "I hope you like that money because you'll never get mine again." It's like they were upset about it. But I don't think it does change, because it's really more about distribution. I mean, the Pilsner Urquell, they still just make it there and it gets shipped here. I do, though, think that the closer you are to the source, the better it tastes. And I think one thing we saw during the making of the movie is that one of the first tap rooms we went into in Portland, it was like a bad basement from the 70s. It was like one of those fake bars and like a cruddy beer can collection. And by the time we were finishing, these tap rooms, tasting rooms that are attached to the breweries are beautiful. And so they're realizing they want to do that. A lot of them, they have food trucks come if they don't have food. So I think going to the pilgrimaging to the place is probably the best experience. So time to go get a beer.